morning and welcome to Saturday Cinema. My name is Becky Rokel and I will be talking to you today about a beautiful tale called The Secondhand Lions through a metaphysical lens. Our plot begins at the end this time in a flash forward of a grown man in his early 30s on an airplane taking a ride home to his family farm. And on the plane, he begins to remember his childhood. He flashes back to a 14-year-old, Walter is his name, driving up to his distant uncle's house. There were two of them, to be left there by his mother, May, to live for the summer with his reclusive bachelor great uncles, Hub and Garth. And she goes off to school. The reluctant uncles give Walter a room in the attic, and he's not very welcome at first. They never raised children before, and they're not happy about having him hang around. Despite living in this ramshackle Texas farm, the uncles are said to have secret fortune, which makes them the target of every traveling salesman around. They, in turn, sit on the porch with their shotguns, shooting at the salesman. Of course, they miss on purpose. Love, gold, and adventure weaves throughout their storytelling as the uncles share some of their life's experience. Walter isn't even sure if it's true or a fairy tale. The subject of truth is critical to Walter because his mother lies to him and he knows this. And his uncles tell him bizarre stories. He desperately desires to learn the truth. Uncle Hub explains, sometimes the things that may or may not be true are the things a man needs to believe in the most. That people are basically good, that honor and courage and virtue mean everything, and that money and power mean nothing. That good always triumphs over evil. As truth students, we know that the power that lives in the truth, capital T, that all people are basically good because God is all good and people are one with the divine and that good. Garth and Hub, the uncles, have gold digging relatives that appear once in a while too in the movie with their children, seemingly to stay close. They're secretly searching for the gold that they're told to have had. Once the uncles recognize that Walter's presence kind of upsets those gold digging relatives, they get a little bit more comfortable with having Walter around. One warm summer evening, Walter hears a loud noise and he sees Uncle Hub walking out the front door in his pajamas. Walter follows him in his sleepwalking. Hub goes to the pond and Walter watches as Hub fights imaginary soldiers in his sleep. He watches as Hub swings his sword about, stabbing these imaginary shoulders, just as Garth shows up. Garth begins to explain a photograph that Walter had found in the attic of a beautiful woman. He shares the story of them joining the Foreign Legion, Hub and Walter, during which Hub fell in love with a beautiful Arabian princess named Jasmine, who was promised to a powerful, rich sheik. After Hub and Jasmine married, the sheik put a price on Hub's head, keeping him in constant peril from assassins. Finally, Hub won the duel against the sheik, but spared his life, warning him to cease the manhunt. Garth shares, a man's body may grow old, but inside his spirit, he can still be as young and as restless as ever. In the metaphysical Bible, the word old means that old is a subject to death and to tell all the ills of the flesh separate in consciousness from God. These stories remind me of parables in the Bible. The metaphysical meaning of parable is a brief symbolic story told to illustrate truth. He, Jesus, taught them many things in parables, Mark 4:2. Over many nights and sleepwalking trips to the pond, Garth continues to share the stories and reveals that Jasmine and their baby died in childbirth. Hub then returned to the French Foreign Legion until he retired with Garth to the farm, where they are resigned to waiting to die. Walter, in search for the truth, asks Hub, and Hub replies, "True love never dies." The metaphysical meaning of love is a divine attribute. It is an idea in the mind, one's mind. God is love and love is God, or quality of being. Divine love is that divine love is broad and unlimited. Hub then changes the subject to his talk on what every boy needs to know before he grows up. They change the subject on and off, and Walter then asks Hub to promise to be around to give him the rest of that speech when he's old enough, and Hub grudgingly agrees. Another evening, Walter trails Garth and discovers that they do have a room full of money underneath the barn. Another fairy tale confirmed. As salesmen continue to attempt to get the old men to buy into their schemes, Walter asks his uncles a significant question. What's the use of having all that money if you're not going to spend it? He persuades them to try to spend some of their money, generally with comical and disastrous results. Packets of seeds to plant vegetables that turn out that they're all corn. Then they order a lion as an animal target, and they end up getting an aged, tame, retired circus lioness, which they turn over to Walter as a pet. Walter names her Jasmine, after Hub's late wife. On their next visit from the annoying relatives, Jasmine is accidentally released and takes to the cornfield, which becomes her new jungle. In town, while loading a 50-pound bag of lion chow, Hub passes out and is taken to the hospital. On leaving, they encounter 4 greasers at the roadside store who draw switchblade knives on Hub, but are easily beaten by him in a fight. Before you know it, May, Walter's mother, and her current boyfriend, a supposed private investigator named Stan, arrive. While the uncles sleep, Stan and May demand that Walter reveal the location of his uncle's fortune, claiming they were actually bank robbers and had stolen it, and that May and Stan were going to return it. Walter chooses to believe his uncles instead of Stan, and Stan becomes violent. As he's throwing Walter around and choking him, Jasmine the lion senses Walter's in danger. She emerges from the cornfield and she attacks Stan. Awakening by the ruckus, Hub and Garth run out after the lion into the cornfield and find that she has died from heart failure while she was defending her cub. Stan has cuts and bruises, but was not eaten by the lioness. The next day, Walter is made to leave with his mother and Stan. And once they're on the road, May explains that Stan will be staying with them to recuperate. But Walter asks her to instead do something that's best for him once. He walks back to his uncle's at the farm that he now calls home. While Hub and Garth are delighted to see him back, Walter insists that in order to make this work, there must be some changes. They must involve themselves in his education, they must eat vegetables, and they must live carefully as he wants them to die of old age. They agree, and a family of three embark on an adventure of a lifetime. Flashing forward 17 years, the adult Walter finally arrives back at the home Texas farm, smiling and remembering. He is told of the untimely demise of his uncle as their failed plane stunt with their biplane smacked into the barn. He is given his uncle's wills, declaring, "The kid gets it all. Just plant us in the garden with that stupid lion." Walter hears a helicopter as it approaches. He looks up and it bears the logo of the Sahara Petroleum. It then touches down in front of him, and a man steps out with his young son, explaining that he had heard about Huvengard's deaths on the radio. He had recognized the names from the two Americans in the tales told to him in his youth by his grandfather, a very wealthy sheik. When the man's young son asked Walter if his uncles really lived, Walter confirms, "Yeah, they really lived." I will leave you today with a quote from Voltaire. "God gave us the gift of life. It is up to us to give ourselves the gift of living well." Thank you for joining me today, and we hope to see you next week. Bless you.